Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brock Beard from NASCAR.info coming at you after the conclusion of the Verizon 200 Cup Series race at the Indianapolis Grand Prix circuit. Can you guys hear me okay? We'll get started here in a bit. I know that there's going to be no shortage of people coming in here at the same time here. So we'll get started here in just a moment. All right. And we'll keep everything else here pulled up in the same time. We're not going to do the screen and screen thing here like we did on the Wednesday show here. I wasn't satisfied with how that looked. So we'll make sure we'll be doing this for the near future here. In the meantime, we'll talk more about that along the way. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. It's really hard to figure out where to start with a race like this. Obviously there's, you got to be happy for the colleague team and AJ Allmendinger getting back to victory lane. A lot of anticipation for this particular event. But a lot of this is reminding me of a different time here about a decade ago, actually, in fact. I think NASCAR is in danger. I'm just going to say it. NASCAR is going to kill someone if they keep going like they're going here. And I hope to God I'm wrong. But this is just getting out of control. This is absolutely out of control. We had the rain back at Coda, the huge storm back there on the back straightaway, and still let the drivers just fly through there and pile into each other. We had New Hampshire where they ignored rain in the area, let the race start. Luckily in that, much less serious accidents. Could have been more serious though. New Hampshire, of course, in its own history. And now we have this today where, again, the narrative we're seeing from a lot of the broadcasts, oh, this wasn't a problem at all the entire weekend. Nobody had any problem. Nobody could have foreseen that this was going to happen. And then it happens and you get very serious accidents, very serious. Thankfully, Joey Logano and Michael McDowell in particular walked away from these accidents. It could have been a lot more serious. I haven't seen a pattern of this kind of conduct in a motorsport sanctioning body, and I may not have the most complete knowledge of this, but this reminds me a lot of IndyCar in 2011. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes here, and I'm troubled by this. I'm troubled very much so by this. In 2011 at New Hampshire, there was a similar situation to the rain that we saw back in July, as a matter of fact, and had an incident where a race was restarted that shouldn't have been restarted, had a big pile up. Thankfully, no drivers were injured. Had a number of other accidents during that race, a lot of controversy, a lot of questionable handlings of the finish. And at the time, it was kind of just treated like, oh, well, isn't this funny? Will Power flipping off, doing the double bird to the officials and all that. And oh, isn't this funny? Knocked over the porta potty. I mean, okay, yeah, it makes a great meme and everything. But then Las Vegas happened. And suddenly it wasn't as funny anymore. This is something that I think, and again, I hope we're not heading this direction, but it's a pattern of conduct. I wouldn't be this concerned if it wasn't just something that's become so commonplace. Back when Ryan Newman had his accident in 2020, I thought Fox did a surprisingly good job handling what was a very serious situation and treating it as serious as it should have been treated. That we didn't know what was going on with Newman and that there was no jumping to conclusions, and the information naturally came out during the week. And thankfully, of course, Newman is not only still with us, but even running in the race today. But then you think about like Charlotte earlier this year, the Truck Series race, where Trey Hutchins had that accident and NASCAR officials didn't notice that he was there, saying, oh, the truck is too dark to see. We were looking somewhere else. Nobody else could have possibly seen that he was there. Johnny Sauter comes along, runs into him, and you have a very serious accident there. Now, thankfully, again, in that case, neither driver was injured, and we're able to just kind of keep going with it and everything. But even that night when that happened, the broadcast, I felt in particular, was very casual and very cavalier about the way that accident occurred and how serious it could have been. And I'm not saying you go out there and be like, oh my gosh, at every moment, everything is, death defying. But like I said early on Twitter here, these drivers are not stuntmen. There is such a thing as an unacceptable risk in these cases. And I think we're getting dangerously close to that point here with a stretch of the season and only before the playoffs, when it's now going to be even more about drivers pushing each other out of the way and wrecking each other for spots and all these different venues. We still got Daytona. We still got Talladega. We got the Charlotte Roval. And yet these things happen throughout this year, and it's never treated as seriously as it is. Bob Jenkins died earlier this week, and it ripped me apart inside when it happened, when the news came. Because I know that a lot of these broadcasters today, if anything that serious as what he saw in his career happened, they wouldn't know how to handle it. And, I saw more of that today. These wrecks happen, and it's just like, oh, look how high this person got. Oh, which flip did you like better? What's going on here? This is absurd. These drivers are at their limit. If you don't believe that, think back to Atlanta when they were questioning what was going on with the reconfiguration of Atlanta and turning it into a super speedway and not consulting any of the drivers. Think about the issues with heat exposure last year when they just added the passenger side window for no reason and already made hot cars even more hot. What's that? What's going on here? Something is seriously wrong here. And again, this is nothing against AJ Allmendinger, nothing against any other storylines here. And again, I hope that I'm wrong. I don't want to be right on this, but there are times where a sanctioning body can be complacent. And okay, maybe in some cases, like in other sports, the danger isn't as high. But in motorsports, the danger is at its highest. Don't fool yourself. This, any wreck could be serious. Nobody thought when Dale Earnhardt had his wreck in 2001 that it was going to be as serious as it was. And then it turned out, of course, that it was. Then you see other wrecks that happen and people just, hop out of the car and it's no big deal. And, we all see it and broadcasters see it. We all come into points here where we feel complacent here at times and just kind of look at it and be like, oh, well, that was weird. And then move on to the next one. But there comes a point where it's unacceptable. There comes a point where it's gone too far. And if we're not in that point now, I think we're very close to it. And there needs to be, I don't know what there needs to be. I think it needs to be treated more seriously. Thank you for the super chats, folks. I'll jump in on those there too. I hate to come out this hard and fast at the beginning here, but it's impossible not to at the start of this. Yeah, that was a very scary series of events. I mean, when you got cars that are skating off the track from that curb where it looks like it's as if the track was soaking wet with water and with rain or something like that, like a sudden rainstorm. And it's not from that. It's from the base plate ripping out of the car when the engine compartment is shoved that far back, like it was on Joey Logano's car after that impact. That's serious. That's a big problem. That is not a small problem. And yeah, and I think, and again, I know that this constantly gets steered towards the broadcasting side of it, but this is where they have a responsibility. I guarantee you, if Wally Dallenbach Jr. was in that booth, he would say, like, yeah, this is ridiculous. That's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. That shouldn't have happened. Robin Miller, God bless him, man. Everybody talking about him this weekend. One of the most outspoken figures in motorsports. I would have loved to get his thoughts on this as he was there at the track this weekend. Because that guy was there for seeing a time where, the sport treated, other motorsports treated things pretty casually and it was even more of a life and death sport than it is today. Bob Jenkins in the same situation as that. And yes, and I saw some comments here in the background here. So, and I totally agree. Yeah, there's been other dangerous races and everything. And yeah, last year at the Brickyard, a lot of the right front tire problems, absolutely agree. But if anything, that points to the fact that this is an even more long-standing pattern of conduct. And that needs to be addressed. This can't keep going. Because what's going to happen is just going to keep building and building and building. And, I am dismayed by both networks, really, especially the TV networks in particular, that everything at the beginning of the race, it's just like a commentary show. It's like NASCAR America, where they're just kind of like, oh, what do you think about this? Oh, I think it's this and this. And oh, what do you think his pit strategy should be? Oh, I think it's this. And oh, you need to get into the corner this way, or this won't happen. And instead of describing what's actually happening in the race. But then when something serious happens like this, they clam up. And all of a sudden it's like they're just passively describing it. Then suddenly it becomes a closer thing to play by play, but there's nothing more to it. It's like, oh, well, they're moving that away. Oh, look at that. What happened there? Oh, wow. Look at how far that car went. And that's it. That's all we get. A lot of the greats are leaving us, folks. And what's still there isn't that great. And it can always change course. We got to get back there someday, and we need to realize what worked and what didn't work, and internalize that, and realize what needs to change, what needs to be different, and make that a part of how we, approach the sport and what we demand out of it. I know a lot of people say that, NASCAR fans, they complain about too many things. Absolutely. Yeah, that happens. I've even reconsidered my thoughts about the numbers being moved around on the side of the car, and I never thought that would happen. But I've seen a lot of great evidence, pictures. Lefty, for example, doing a lot of great renders. The numbers moved forward, and I'm like, okay, that sounds great. So I get more information. I can make a more informed opinion of that. But being able to have that information is what's required to get to that point. When you have broadcasts that aren't telling you what's happening, or they're not willing to go out and say anything about it, where the pressure is so much. And it's easy for me to say as somebody that just goes to a couple of races and just talks to his camera every week at home. It's very different, I understand, from somebody that's broadcast to a nationwide audience that then gets diverted to NBC, SN because of a golf game happening. That's a very different experience. And I'm sure there's probably is a lot of pressure being put on them from one source or another. I'm not going to pretend to know how that works. It would be interesting to find out. I don't think we ever would. But that's where we get with this. And the problem is there is a net effect to that. Narratives get created. And when those narratives get created, it's very hard to overcome those. It's very hard to bring up additional information and say, oh, no, the way they had it, that was actually wrong. We should have done this. And unfortunately, a lot of times it only gets clear in hindsight. Certainly back in the 2000 season, when everything happened with Adam Petty and Kenny Irwin and Tony Roper, it was reaching a point there where it's like, yeah, what is going on? And, okay, we can't do this. I guess we can't do that. But is something happening? And then you would have the restrictor plates at New Hampshire, and then you create you say, okay, well, that went fine. We can move on. And then, of course, what happened in February? It shouldn't get to this point. But that's where we're heading, folks. And we've heard this before. We've heard this from other competitors. We don't have guys like Tony Stewart out there as drivers anymore. Thankfully, we still have Tony out there as an owner. But, it took much less than this back in 2006 for him to say that, somebody else was going to, that there was going to be something serious happening at a race at Daytona if they kept driving the way they did. Now, of course, a lot of that got blown over because he had that incident with Matt Kenseth that pushed him in the grass and had potentially a very serious accident there. But we're just not hearing that. And what we have heard, again, the frustrations back at Atlanta over the track and trying to create a completely different track that maybe it's not conducive for. Kyle Busch, to his credit, was very open in particular about that. Kevin Harvick, other drivers, on the list there as well. We should be concerned. We should be very, very concerned. And I don't like being a guy to ring the alarm bell or anything on this. And again, and we should certainly be thankful and happy that people were able to walk away from these accidents. But culturally, something serious is going on here, and it needs to be addressed. Now, what the solution is, I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know, but I think the first step in addressing any of these situations is to address the problem. And clearly, NASCAR is trying to get as much of an audience as possible. They're pulling out all the stops, running these different venues and trying all these different things to the point where they're even changing the arrangements of like where they put these speed bumps on the track. We'll certainly talk about that too, because that became its own whole other thing here. But they're all symptoms of the same disease at this point. NASCAR is seems to be just picking up speed and moving the blinders even further up here, so they're not seeing what's going on around them. And I don't know what's causing that. So hopefully we'll find out. I don't know what the proper solution is, but I hope we get there. But I hope it starts a conversation here at the very least. Because that's where it needs to start. And so that's, of course, one thing we're doing tonight here. So definitely eager to get your guys' thoughts on that. Again, coming off hard here to start with, but I would be remiss if I did not, certainly. So, yeah. So again, thank you for the super chats. Let me read these off here too. My goodness, thank you so much, Beast of Metal, there for your super chat. First off, there. Okay, well, I'm not sure if I could entirely read all of that, but good job trying to offer yourselves today, NASCAR and IMS. Especially got to love Doug Bull's self-serving attempt to cover his own culpability and trying to cover up both the atrocious design and even worse maintenance. I definitely understand the frustration. And again, thank you for the super chat for sure. It was interesting to see. I mean, I think with the track president coming out there and pulling rather than pushing with the push broom was kind of another thing that became almost meme worthy in the process of it. I hope that, but again, it's my issue is much more, I think, with the officiating in this case than it is with the track. NASCAR is kind of coming up with these decisions, say, oh, well, hey, we'll just run the infield road course and it'll be great. And we'll do this. And I think having a companion event with IndyCar was a great idea. I think that's a cool idea. I think we saw a lot of positives from that, from competitors looking at these different disciplines and maybe encouraging something where maybe another Indy 500 or so in the future, they can trace it back to this same weekend and something good can come from that. But the sanctioning body, I think, is the biggest concern because they're the kind of the common denominator between the fog at COTA, the rain at New Hampshire, and this curb here this weekend. There should have been a caution when Martin Truex Jr. spun out there. You could see all this debris explode out from under Matt DiBenedetto's car, clear as day. And in a lap that's long enough for NASCAR to both communicate and hand down a penalty in 1991 to Ricky Rudd for spinning out a car, not even debris or anything like that. It is completely inexcusable that they could not, in that same time, more than that time, come up with actually throwing the caution flag. That's inexcusable. It's easy to say that in hindsight, but hey, they shouldn't have put themselves in that situation. That was absurd. That shouldn't have happened. And again, they're very lucky that wreck wasn't more serious than it was. Those cars were obliterated. And there were warnings along the way, too. It seemed like that they were going to kind of open things up and it wasn't going to be that big of a deal from the Xfinity race. Oh, it's just that one rogue curb that they had over there. And once they got rid of that, everything will be fine. Well, I mean, the other problem is you got this other curve on the other direction, and you also have problems with debris that was getting under the curb. Now, didn't we have problems in the Xfinity race with debris getting under that curb in turn 6? I could have sworn that had happened. Maybe I'm just not remembering it correctly, but definitely mention it in the chat if we got to that point. Because during today's broadcast, they kind of gave the impression that this hadn't happened at all this weekend. And I'm not exactly sure if that's true. So definitely mention in the comments below if there was a situation with that. But that's kind of where I'm thinking on that, because a lot of it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Thank you again for your second super chat there too, Beast of Metal. There, back to the oval with you all now and forever, and the hashtags after that as well. Look, again, it's there, and again, somebody else made a point on here too that again, the issues that you had with the oval, there were issues with tires last year. Denny Hamlin had a very serious accident in the final laps of it that ultimately cost him the lead and perhaps even a shot at ever winning there if they don't actually return back to the oval. Having that situation play out there. There's a lot, but again, there's a lot to kind of look at there. Now, again, could they possibly run this particular road course in a safer way? Hard to tell. We got the next gen car coming up. Hopefully the integration of the splitter is different. The cars don't ride quite as low on the track. Hopefully they can handle these corners better. again, the thing I'm hoping for is that a lot of the old LR car series, the left-right series that NASCAR man talked about in his video a while back, possibly that there's a way that that could actually kind of be integrated into it, and it's a car that can actually, get around these obstacles. One thing I mentioned on Twitter yesterday after the Xfinity Series race is I do believe that this is more of a car problem in the cases of like the actual debris getting stuck under the curbs and the cars running wide in particular, than it is a driver problem. I know there was some what sparked that is I saw some complaints saying, oh well, NASCAR's not blaming their drivers for just disregarding track limits and running wide all over the place. Well, a lot of the tracks have allowed for that. We certainly you've seen that in Watkins Glen more and more, where it's gotten to the point where pretty much the whole track is pavement, and you're hauling the mail into really fast corners, and you got all this distance to kind of catch yourself. Yeah, I do believe that there's something to be said for it reducing the skill level and encouraging you to drive a bit too hard there. But at the same time, these cars have always never been precision bits of equipment. They do swing wide, and especially the Cup Series cars, where they're based on just history of just being very heavy truck arm suspension cars. Same issues they've had on road courses for decades when they just had 2 of them a year. Usually wasn't a problem because they would just kind of salvage whatever run they could. But now road course racing's become more specialized, and what they do to the cars is more specialized. But at the same time, the cars are still never going to handle as well as you watch an IndyCar race. Those of you that were actually at the track this weekend got a good taste of that, and seeing how precise the Indy cars are, staying between the lines, and the Cup cars just struggling to get around it. Cup cars don't have a unique aero kit that they can run that's going to make the cars handle better on road courses. IndyCar does. And of course, Formula One, they only run road courses. So that's even more specialized on that direction. I think it's kind of a false comparison, really, to kind of be too critical of the Cup Series drivers when the technology itself is so different. And so that's where, again, I do blame much more the sanctioning body in this than the drivers. The track is also the element that I think, is up in the air. Obviously, they've been using turtles in these different curbs at different tracks. Charlotte Roval hasn't really had this issue, although they did have issues before with the hangnail wall that was sticking out too far from the chicane in the first year that they ran it, and things weren't as perfect there, and they had to kind of work that out. Again, I think there is something to be said for, expecting a better outcome, trying to kind of fine tune this and make it better. But we haven't really reached that point, I guess, with this race. And it's surprising because we didn't really see this issue with the Xfinity race last year. But again, they did different things with the curbs and everything and so forth. But this is again another thing to really look at. Was the track kind of unprepared for it? Well, certainly in this case, for whatever reason, the NASCAR Cup Series splitters dug into that curb a lot harder than the Xfinity ones did, or they broke off easier, or in that one case where almost the entire thing was underneath there. For some reason, it was a particular problem with the Cup Series cars versus the Xfinity guys. And we just saw a lot more of that, in today's race. I mean, that's something that, really needs to kind of be looked at. Is that something that's going to just go away when you have the next gen car? I'd like to believe so. But again, these are the kind of things that the sanctioning body should be looking at. And again, that's where it goes back their direction. The track has no control over how the cars look or what their design is. They can just try to make the track as safe as they can. And although it was something that ultimately did fail on the track, I think they were doing the best they could under the circumstances. And they had no reason to believe, unless there was something that happened in the Xfinity race, really, that anything was going to happen with that curb. The issue on Saturday certainly was with that other turtle in the runoff area. And to their credit, right after the race, they lifted that thing out and took it out of there. So thankfully, we didn't have to deal with that, at least. It was interesting that, again, this curb ended up being more of a problem than the grass. A lot of the discussion, I think Pockrass posted a great string of posts on Twitter to actually clear this up, saying that runoff area in turn 6 needed to be repaved, needed to be fixed up. You could be critical of the track on that. Why wasn't it fixed up since May when they know that this event is going to be run on the infield road course? Again, I'm not sure how heavily of an issue that was, because it didn't seem like the surface was breaking up. Didn't seem like cars were losing control by running off in that area. So I think that seemed to work out okay. But at the same time, also not trying to get the drivers in the grass. We did have drivers get into the grass, put a wheel off, But we didn't really see splitters get ripped off there now, did we? Not really as much. The issues instead were on Saturday, that yellow turtle where that whole line of traffic went over it. And then, of course, today, that other curb. So it's the curbs that are an issue. And you can look at the track or the sanctioning body. You could probably be critical on both of them to those particular installations. We did have practice and qualifying, and if they did, they didn't have any reason to think that there was a different issue with those. But much like with the turtle that we saw in the Saturday race, there's a very big difference between having single cars come through or giving themselves a lot of distance in practice, or single car qualifying with cars going through there, and an entire field of cars spilling out to what's basically the first high-speed part of that track after you take the green flag. After you kind of go through that stepping stone pattern, that's the part where you really lean things out and take off from there. And we saw that difference in both series, and it turned out to be serious in both cases. And again, thankfully, it wasn't more serious than it turned out to be, but it very easily could have been. Thank you for your super chat, Nate Licard, as well. We need our driver strike like in the 60s. Well, again, I don't know what the best solution is. We've seen the team owners unionize, and now you have the race team alliance, and they've been able to call the shots on many more things than I think they should be capable of. I do think that if something like that does happen in the series, it shouldn't be looked at lightly. Look at how much that the RTA did to fundamentally alter the Cup Series itself by the creation of the charter system, by shortening the field to 40 cars, all things with just unilateral action for no real reason, really. It was never really explained why these things were so necessary to happen, if only to give themselves another asset that they could cash out, which is only has value if your team fails. So if something like that happened with the drivers, I think it would be very serious. And something needs to happen. There needs to be some kind of a conversation there. The days of Big Bill France Sr. and Big Bill France Jr. or Bill France Jr. rather, for all the good that they did in the sport there were certainly times where they made their feelings on unions known. You certainly check out Slapshoe's videos on that, where he talks about that too. And even when it got to the point where independent drivers were trying to work out a pay schedule with Bill France Jr., they noticed that it was even more strict with him than it was with Bill Sr. So any kind of effort, of course, where drivers are trying to do anything on this, there just needs to be a conversation. I think what fixes a lot of these situations, there needs to be open dialogue. I think the drivers feel like they're not being listened to. I know that because we heard that already back in Atlanta. I think they feel that decisions are being made without them being consulted. I think they feel that the sport is going a particular direction. They're having to kind of play catch up a bit. And I think NASCAR feels that they have no real reason to change the status quo. What it's going to take at that point, I don't know. That's up for debate. I'm not going to pretend to have the answers. I'd love to hear what the drivers think about it. But of course, a lot of drivers, they're under such a microscope in the social media age. Who knows what they're going to be able to share? So there's that problem. Thank you for your super chat as well, Michael Harvey. Love the passion, Brock. 100% agree with you. Thank you as well. I hope I haven't turned too many of you off here with this discussion at the start, but again, it's definitely one to certainly minutes ago. Damn, that was fun, says Clint Boyer. Truth is, this race today was exactly what we needed. Some hated it, some loved it. Key is we are all talking about it. Be a fun week of debate coming. See what I'm saying here? This is, you know what this is? This is the bridge crew on the Titanic ignoring the ice warnings. Okay? This is cultural. That's troubling. That's really troubling. I don't know what the solution is, I get there's a lot of pressure. I get there's a lot that's going on with these a lot that's going on here, but I can't imagine these drivers, certainly these team owners, for tearing up as much equipment has been torn up. I can't imagine they're happy about this. And then the drivers, very serious hits. Again, McDowell and Logano, I think, got the worst of it. And that's just from the visuals. Austin Dillon had a very hard hit there. And he seemed to speak out during his interview after the broadcast got switched over to it. And again, it's gotten to the point now during all the absurdity of today, that all the problems they had during the broadcast, where they lost the feed and were playing golf during the side by side, or they had to cut it at the end of the broadcast, that almost feels like the least of their problems at this point. This is yeah, this is concerning. It's concerning. I don't want to hype that too much. Oh, we got lag. Do we have lag here? Okay, I apologize if I'm not getting any note on the stream here, so it looks like it's still working okay. So hopefully we'll see. But a lot of discussion to certainly talk about from well, a lot to certainly come up this week. So yeah, be a fun week of debate coming. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Okay, that sounds like game on to me. Beast of Metal, thank you. My goodness, man. Thank you so much for your super chats here tonight. Just a reminder, an organization of wealthy individuals affecting governance over a larger entity, officially or otherwise, is not a union as originally conceptualized, but instead a form of dictatorship called a plutocracy. Well, certainly. Yeah, and that's what we're fighting up against here. I don't know. It something needs to change, certainly. And again, I think it starts with dialogue. And I think it's going to take some effort on both sides here to make the concerns clear, but it's also going to take a lot of effort on the other side to give it a listen and at least consider taking some kind of action. It's been troubling here this year, and you can't blame the pandemic and all this other stuff going on in the economy or whatever. This is just other stuff that's happening here. If it's not safe to do something, then you kind of want to take a step back and reevaluate things. Every job I've had, there's always been like safety stops. Like, whoa, hang on, whoa, that wasn't right. Let's take a moment and figure out what happened here. We're not talking about blame. We'll just talk about like what happened here and what we can do to avoid that. And that would be a good place to go. And then then you kind of kick the machines on again. You kind of get going again. There's nothing wrong with doing that. I think it's very hard in a sport where it's about the next lap, it's about the next moment, it's about the next week, it's about the next season, it's about the next car, it's about everything else. Everything's always in the future, but there's always that danger of overdriving your headlights, and then that's when you really get a problem there. And we're seeing it. We're watching it now, folks. I hope that they pump the brakes a little bit here, or at least recognize that they need to, because it's not going to just go away. And it's not just something you can just be kind of like, oh, well, that was fun, and then move on to the next one. That's going to be a problem. That's going to be a real problem. So, yeah. So again, oh my goodness, there's 20 people in here. Thank you so much for tuning in here, folks. I appreciate you guys tuning in here that are new to the stream here. It's usually not this contentious here with something like this, but certainly leading off with that tonight. What I usually do on the shows here, we'll talk about the action from all the races this weekend. Well, the Cup and Xfinity. I didn't watch the IndyCar race, so I can't comment on that, although I am pleased with Cody Ware running both events this weekend. I think that was huge for him. It would have been nice if that got even more attention than it did. I like the picture that they did with his IndyCar and his Cup car together. It's unfortunate that his weekend ended the way it did. Thanks to the Rick Ware Racing team for tweeting me saying that they had an oil line get cut after they got spun by Almirola late. They were pulling behind the wall to get that fixed. NASCAR put them on the DVP instead. They didn't know that. That message didn't get communicated. How about that? And they ultimately got parked for the rest of the race, which is unfortunate. They were pretty much on the lead lap still at the time that they pulled into the garage area. So, again, lack of communication. We've seen this with the DVP. We saw this actually. Well, now we're going to open this package. Yesterday in the Xfinity Series race. Explain to me, perhaps, how 8 cars, or I guess 6 or 7 cars rather, could run over that rumble strip at the far end of turn 6. All of them suffer serious damage. Some of them have to go to the garage area, including Kevin Harvick and Brandon Jones and Brandon Brown. How is it that when Brandon Jones and Brandon Brown go to the garage area, it's the DVP, and when Kevin Harvick goes to the garage area, it's a power steering issue, it's a mechanical issue, and he could have returned to the race if he wanted to. Now, ultimately, this is moot because at the end of the day, Harvick didn't actually come back to the race, and he still finished where he was going to, even if he was out under the DVP. But again, lack of communication. It sounded like during the broadcast, they were making a big point of saying, oh, well, he has a power steering issue and all this, when every replay shows that he also did run over that same bump and actually did suffer what would have been crash damage under the same criteria as the 4 or 5 cars that were behind him and a couple more that were behind him. So why did that happen? I don't think we're going to hear about it, but it would be interesting to find out, wouldn't it? A lot of these teams depend on that, and sometimes if a car is parked out of a race, that can have serious effects, especially in a playoff system for what it is. We saw that with Matt Kenseth when he had too many crew members over the wall. I thought that was very bizarre, really. So I don't exactly know what happened there, but there's not that transparency. We don't know. You can listen to the radio during this and try to piece together what information you can, but that's where it gets difficult. So let's see here. Good on my end. We're good now. Okay, good. I'm glad the thing didn't bounce back too much there. Alrighty. So again, now that all that's out there for sure, let me also say congratulations to AJ Allmendinger on the win and the colleague racing for finally getting their first Cup win. Well, finally, gosh, they've only been doing it for like the last couple of years, just doing a few Cup races here and there. Good to see, especially Allmendinger. I think back to 2000, what was it, 2017, when he did the bunny shift at Sears Point, tore a transmission out of it. He looked just beyond just sad, just like embarrassed when he was in the garage area there and he finished last in that race. I didn't even interview him really. He was already on TV and we got the quote there. I think he was just at loose ends at JTG, and I hate to see that. I think that team's done a lot of good, and he did as well, getting them their first win. And Watkins Glen way back in 2014. Hard to think of a time that far back in the sport, but of course now it has been. But this colleague team, it seems to be the fountain of youth. They get him in there, and he's now running as many races as he is in the Xfinity Series this year. Justin Haley is going to be full time in the Cup Series next year. Now that they got their charters, I think it's an exciting program, and the higher ups of the team. I was watching. Was it Chris Rice as the head guy, if I remember correctly? He was like filming stuff from Victory Lane at Texas when they had the Andy's frozen custard paint scheme revealed there, and he's a very hands-on guy. He's here, there, he's doing all their social media and stuff, and he's just over the moon there with the win today. So, again, it's for all of the controversy and ridiculous stuff that happened before that. It's good that there is at least something positive to take from it there as well. And on top of that, of course, the guys competing in the IndyCar Series and the Cup Series the same weekend and kind of getting that cross cooperation, or a lot of the IndyCar guys staying over to watch whatever the heck this was today on Sunday. I hope this hasn't turned them off of going to a Cup race in general. Maybe they'll check out something a little bit more tame, but quite the ways to start it that way. Also looking at the Cup Series race today, unfortunate deal for Chase Briscoe. We'd seen him do some really good things at the road courses this year, which has been pretty much the few moments that he's actually had good moments during what's been a very difficult rookie season. He's going through a lot of the same problems that Christopher Bell did last year in the 95 car. And even with an even better organization there, of course, the Stewart-Haas number 14. But, great run. I think, what was it? Road America, Watkins Glen. He had some good runs there. Looked like he was even going to be able to sneak off maybe a win, if not certainly a top 5. Heartbreaking there that he ran off the course there on that last restart. And of course, the situation with Denny Hamlin, little remnants of Jerry Nadeau in that situation there, running off course and getting back out there. Nadeau, even in 98, lost a couple spots from doing that, and it ultimately broke his car. Briscoe, in this case, slotted in behind Hamlin. And then, of course, you had the incident with Hamlin in the corner there. Poor Hamlin now comes into the last couple of rounds before the cutoff for the playoffs without a single win this year. And now it's getting to the point where we really have to ask the question, is it going to be one or both between Hamlin and Harvick not winning this year? It seems completely unpredictable, but, the series has had this happen before. Drivers like Jeff Gordon and Tony Stewart and Dale Jr. have struggled before, even under old formats of the playoffs, back when it was the chase. It's going to be interesting to see at Michigan. We got Michigan next week, and then we're going to have the Daytona race not too far after that, right? We're just down to like the last two. So we're getting down to it at this point here, and it's going to be, very bizarre. But, hate it for both guys involved there between Denny Hamlin and Chase Briscoe. Hate it for Kyle Larson, who seemed to have the race very well in hand until the late cautions came out. But that's so much a part of today's NASCAR that you almost have to prepare for it in one way or another. The Hooters and McDonald's losing streaks continue. Hooters since 1992 with now Chase Elliott driving this weekend, and McDonald's now with Bubba Wallace this weekend, going back to 1994 with Jimmy Spencer's win. Both those sponsors still not finding their way to victory lane, but coming very close to it. Bubba, I think, still got a 15th place finish, I think, out of the race today. Or is it no? Okay, looks like it's a little further back. Did I miss him here? Or was he further up? No, 13th. No, good run there. So, again, a lot of teams that actually had a lot of damage still getting some decent finishes. Matt DiBenedetto, 5th spot there, still able to get a good run, even after his good run at Road America. Not the same kind of performance, of course. Had a lot of damage, had to work a lot of strategy to kind of get back up there. Eric Jones in the 7th spot. Justin Haley, talking about him and being a team that's not in the playoffs, winning a race in the regular season. Justin Haley getting an 8th spot. Austin Cindric was spinning out a lot. It looked like he was going to be untouchable after he dominated the latter half of that Xfinity race yesterday. But again, the Cup Series just shows how much more challenging it is, whether it's a completely disastrous race like today or a relatively clean race like Road America. Cindric's had situations where cars have either fallen apart or just not been far up enough in the order. In this case, Cindric comes back from some spins and gets a 9th place finish. I think that's a new career best for him, if I'm not mistaken. Ryan Newman had the right rear quarter panel pulled out on his car for much of the distance, still finishes in the 10th spot. He was going to be a contender for last place for a lot of the beginning of this race. Ultimately comes out there. Kevin Harvick had a piece of one of the Rick Ware cars. I think it was part of Davison's car, embedded in the passenger side of his machine. He finishes in the 14th spot. Truex had a lot of damage too in 15th. Corey LaJoie ramped his car over that bump and potentially almost got involved in the Michael McDowell accident as well. Still got a 16th place finish there. He had a good run at the Daytona Road Course too, didn't he? Or he was up there in the mix. It seemed like he does a decent job at these infield ones. And then, of course, at Sears Point, I think he had a top 10 run going there. Unfortunately, didn't shake out for him in that case when he had the incident in turn 11. Looking further back, Quinn Houff in the 22nd spot, just one spot back at Tyler Reddick. Reddick doing some quality points racing today, winning the first stage, staying up there for much of the distance. It's unfortunate with the stage cautions that now the people competing for the win most often pit short of the stages and deny themselves stage points. It kind of takes the sporting element out of it, unfortunately, where you can't go for max points. It'll be interesting to see how that shakes out for the Roval. Of course, the Roval's already been in the playoffs, but that same aspect too. Timmy Hill came through as the first driver off the lead lap, just behind Chase Briscoe. Cole Custer looked like he had a top 5 run going. Ended up getting some damage there, dropping back to the 25th spot with the rear end shoved in. Keselowski had the same situation there in turn 13, backed it into the wall in the short chute, came back to finish in the 24th spot. Hamlin 23rd and Briscoe 26th after their incident late in the race. Ross Chastain was flagged off the track before I think either the last restart or the next to last one. Dropped him back to the 29th spot. I used 2 laps down, so I guess that was the last one. And then further back, pretty much everybody back there had problems. Logano, Preece, Christopher Bell had a very hard hit with Preece going into that corner when that corner was that curb was coming apart. Anthony Alfredo, I want to give a shout out to him. They had a sway bar come apart there during the early laps. Apparently, they were part of that incident with Newman at the beginning that perhaps caused that damage on the right rear of Newman's car. Alfredo stayed out there, and much like Josh Bilicki in the Saturday race, managed to get to the end of the first stage so they can make some repairs. Ultimately, he shows up in the 38th spot, 27 laps down. I believe he finally actually pulled off the track, but he did complete 68 of the 94 laps in this. So kudos to him. I know there haven't been a lot of bright spots in Alfredo's season, even with Michael McDowell kind of sneaking in some good runs there as his teammate. We're seeing a performance more like we traditionally saw out of rookies before the late 90s, or especially before Jeff Gordon came around. So he's been further back in the order. But kudos to him. I know at one point he was over the radio saying that quitting isn't in his vocabulary, reminiscent of Mason Massey at the Bristol Xfinity race last year, where he missed the first half of the race with a mechanical issue and still came out and managed to climb out of last place. Alfredo doing very similar this time around, finishing ahead of Cody Ware and Andy Lally. Another nice story from this weekend, kind of buried in everything else. Andy Lally getting a top 10 for BJ McLeod's team. Tapped in at the last second to replace Kyle Tilley, hoping he feels better after his shoulder injury, apparently reported this weekend. Lally getting up there and getting some, well, it would have been stage points. I don't even know if he was eligible for stage points this year. Running in the number 78 car, BJ McLeod's Cup effort with Matt Tifft. Ultimately finishes in the 39th spot, had some mechanical issue there that put them behind the wall, and they were done for the day before a lot of the chaos ensued. Hopefully with their car more or less in one piece, so they can keep going from here and maybe use that one for the Roval. But Lally, Lally's been a great figure this year. When he hasn't been a good broadcaster, when he has been a good broadcaster, of course, on these road courses, we've also seen him really get some good runs out of a lot of equipment that maybe we don't see up there as at front as often. And BJ McLeod's effort in general, certainly one to look at. They've had some surprising runs with other drivers before, but good to see on both ends, really, for that organization. For the 78, as well as I believe he was in he was in the 78 on Saturday too. Yeah, the Lemons of Love car there. So kudos to him on that. Oh, we got lag again. Uh-oh. Okay. I'm not sure what I can do on the lag front here, but we'll see. I don't know. Does it lag when I talk faster or slower? I'm not even sure, but my goodness. Kyle Foster, thank you for joining in the chat here as well. Briscoe is parked. I don't know what that means. I know there was Andy Lally said that he was parked, but I think he just had mechanical issues. I don't know if that's just a shorthand. Thank you, Brandon Brock, for your super chat. I don't know if we've spoken before. If you're new to the chat, certainly welcome, first of all. Personally, I like the track, but I think they need to widen out that chicane and get rid of all the curbing. I think they should do a double header and do the road course one day and the Brickyard 400 the next. Well, that's a very good idea. I think last year, even though of course the pandemic, you couldn't have fans in the stands, but if they had fans, I think they would have been treated to a really cool weekend between the Xfinity Series running the road course and then the Cup Series running the Brickyard 400. I think coming into this season, there was some concerns already about the possibility of losing a crown jewel. I know some have scoffed at that because the race has kind of lost a little bit of its luster, especially since 2008 and the tire debacle that happened that year. It used to be when you had like Juan Montoya and his constant pursuit to try to win it, or Penske trying to win it, because they always seem to come up short with Rusty Wallace and then Kurt Busch. And now, of course, Brad Keselowski ultimately wins it, later on in this time. It's a race that never had a last lap pass for the win, at least in its first 10 or 11 runnings there. But had some dramatic moments. Casey Kane winning his last race there under dramatic circumstances there is a moment that certainly stands out, especially now that Kane is now retired from the sport. The Brickyard 400 and the loss of it is a really compelling story, quite honestly. I might actually do something with that further down the line here, because really back in 1994, that was the biggest thing. That was meteoric. You would have thought like Elvis was racing or something. That event was like, it was an instant crown jewel before it even ran, because everybody wanted to be the first person to test a lap, the first person to complete a lap, the first person to lead, first person to win the pole, the first to do this, to do that, to do everything. And because they knew that every one of those names was going to be in the record books, and still are to this day. A lot of times you look up HB Bailey, it still gets mentioned that he was the first person to go out and do a qualifying lap there. It was a tremendous, and I'd even go as far to say magical time, quite honestly. It seems even more so because it's hard to reconcile that with the way the sport is today. I think it's easy to get jaded with a lot of, just having it every year and the same people seem to win it. And Jimmy Johnson won a ton of them, and Gordon won a ton of them. And now Kyle Busch and others were kind of running away with it here too. But it stinks to lose it because it's had its own bit of history. But as I also said, I think racing in Indianapolis in general is always kind of felt a little weird, and probably did to some even back in '94. I have no doubt that it did. That at the same time, and I talked about this back in Knoxville, I was surprised there wasn't really any outrage from the sprint car dirt track faithful of NASCAR, kind of nosing their way in there and having their truck series run there. And it didn't seem like there was near the excitement over that event, at least not from what I could hear or what I could see from advertising, versus the first race at Eldora, of course, when they were bringing NASCAR back to the dirt tracks for that weekend. What was that, 2013? So a very different time in that one. I think that it could certainly be excused if people feel like it's an invasion, and I would kind of extend it to that. But again, if they go back to running IRP, I think that would be great. If they have other venues they can look at, there's other venues that are clawing at each other here, but again, if there's a way that it's a simple fix and they just need to get their curb thing straightened out, and it's just this one corner, and otherwise they get it worked out, maybe it can still be a good venue, but we'll see. We'll see. I think they're probably going to do the road course again next year. I have no idea what the schedule is going to look like, but I think that they're probably not going to do the oval. It's hard to say. I think both have their problems, but it's. I think one of the biggest mistakes was running the Xfinity Series on the oval, because that immediately made the Brickyard 400 less special. And then they tried to cover that by running other events that weekend, which wasn't a bad idea. You could have done that and still had the Brickyard 400 be singular, just not other NASCAR series running there. I thought they were going to run a truck race there eventually, and just those engines just not able to wind up high enough to compete out there, and really diminish the quality of it. I think that was the biggest mistake, quite honestly. I think that was worse than the tire problem in 2008, where they did the Xfinity Series there. And now, of course, you got the Xfinity Series there running the road course with the Cup Series, and there's that part of it too. Ryan Moore, thank you for your super chat here. With a fan abandonment after 2008, how much more damage comes from this? I think it's clear an omen as any that NASCAR doesn't belong here. Certainly one to talk about, and it kind of dovetails with what we were just talking about here. It's a difficult event. It's a difficult way that all of this is played out. I think that NASCAR, again, it's the momentum of the sport is always going to move forward, but there should be a little bit of a pull back a little bit and understanding kind of the history of the sport. I thought the throwback weekend was a great idea in that concept there. But the Brickyard is, as much as anything else, it's a symbol of the absolute peak. It's Icarus before the wings started melting. It's as high as the sport got. I think there have been other better races. I think there have been other more exciting races, but I don't think there's ever been a bigger race than the first Brickyard 400 in 1994. But it came at a cost. I think it was never going to get that big again. I think that was the absolute peak. And there may have been other stuff that happened in the late 90s. You had Britney Spears showing up at the track. You had huge sellout crowds at races. The twilight of Dale Earnhardt's career before everything that happened there. That was big too, but that was all, I believe, an effect of that from 94. I think that was really a very sudden and meteoric rise in that sense. And it stinks to lose that. But yeah, I do think that there's others, racing purists and stuff, that could be just as kind of upset about them actually running there. I know an open wheel fan probably would look at it very differently. Even this weekend, where you got an IndyCar race, but the predominant part of the schedule is NASCAR for the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series at Indianapolis. It's interesting that Daytona and Talladega were both proven to be too fast for Indy cars, and they tried doing that, and then they just couldn't do it. Whereas the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series has been able to be like, oh, we can do this, yeah, no problem. I don't know. It's a complicated issue, and I know there's a lot of back and forth on that, and I'm sure the Donald Davidsons of the world could probably comment on it much better than I can. But yeah, there's a lot of aspects to that. Brandon Brock, thank you again. Wow, thank you for the other super chat here. One piece of debris off the racing surface, caution. Debris all over the track and a car in the tire barrier, keep racing. Yeah, exactly. That Truex thing, that should have caused a caution. I thought Truex didn't hit the wall because they cut the camera away that quick. But again, the debris clearly, when it's literally exploding out of the 21 car. There didn't seem to be any indication they were racing the sun. It seemed like they had enough sunlight to get to the end. It didn't look anywhere near as dark as 2017 did. So I don't know if that was a situation, but yeah, that was definitely a big mistake. And that's where, again, I'm more critical on the sanctioning body on this, and especially the officiating. Okay. All righty. So, Billy Noyes, I see your comment on here as well in the GMS rumored to take an offer for a charter from Rick Ware. I don't know anything more about that. Alexander Green, you missed most of the race. Yeah, I mean, again, it's hard to say. Ooh, NASCAR should have left the Brickyard when the split remerged, says MLP Pro Swag 69. That's a good point. That probably would have been the right time. Because that would have been 2007, 2008, thereabouts. Yeah. That's kind of a different situation. Alrighty. Did I miss? Let's see. Oh, make sure I didn't miss any super chats here in miss time. iRacer CB, thank you again for your super chat. Hey, Brock, curious as to your opinion on the radio style broadcast. I used to enjoy them, but I'm starting to think they're getting a bit old. If I didn't know any better, I wouldn't have thought that today's race was a radio broadcast. I think that's probably more a consequence of the style of racing that we saw and just how crazy it was. I think at Watkins Glen, I thought it was very good. I would like to see, I think what I would really like to see is a combination of what Fox did with the drone cam at Sears Point and the radio style broadcast that they had at Watkins, that NBC had at Watkins Glen. I think a happy medium would be right in there. I was very surprised by how good the camera work was at Sears Point. I know it got a lot of criticism, but having been to that track a number of years and wanted to see, just the sense of speed, that track always gives the impression that it's a lot slower than it is. But I thought with the drone cam, it gave a really good sense of like how loose those cars are and how they're really hanging on a lot of those tight turns. And I was very impressed with that. But I like the radio broadcast. I think it's a step closer to what ESPN used to have. And again, I always bring it up. It's the gold standard. That's why I bring it up all the time. Not just with the news with Bob Jenkins, of course, but yeah, you used to have Benny Parsons and Ned Jarrett out on the track, and they would have completely different views. And especially at a track, I think that's the other trick too. When it's a place like Watkins Glen, it's spread out so far that you really need to have people in different views to kind of get different scenes of it. You could argue it's the same with Indianapolis because the track is just a big rectangle, and I guess you can kind of do the same thing there. Somehow it's not quite the same thing though. I think it seems like Watkins Glen covers a larger acreage somehow because it's so many straightaways and right-hand turns. I don't know if you measure them side to side. I never really thought about that. If you could fit Watkins Glen in Indianapolis, you probably can't. But it's a massive track. I never really fully appreciated that until going there, just how big that place is. And I think maybe in the Indy race, it seemed like the radio calls from one to the next are kind of bleeding into each other. And it seemed like when something happened, they didn't kind of catch it as quick as they did at Watkins Glen, or maybe they were talking over each other. I don't know what it was exactly. I have to rewatch some parts of it. But yeah, I didn't think it was as good of a radio broadcast as we saw at Watkins Glen last week. Let's see. Alrighty. So let's see. We talked about the Cup Series race. Yeah, Cody Ware in the last place spot. Unfortunate for him. 2 in a row now for the 51 car. James Davison was your last place finisher last week after the mechanical issues in turn 6. I still call it turn 10. I'm used to doing counting the boot without them going through it. So you go from 5 straight to 10 and 11. But yeah, so in that corner there. But the 2 in a row for the 51 team, I believe, is now finished last in at least one Cup race since 2017. That's one stat I'm kind of working on for the article here. The number 51 car never finished last in any of the runnings of the Brickyard 400 before that as well. We'll jump into the Xfinity race here too. We touched on it a little bit with Andy Lally run and Austin Cindric cruising to the victory. I guess not too much more to add from that now that we talked about the curb situation and just how ridiculous that was. Again, the very big difference from the race, and I hammered on this, and I'll just kind of touch it lightly here, is a world of difference between the cars going through there in practice and qualifying than the race. I think the reason we didn't see that issue in practice or qualifying is because they didn't have like 20 other cars in front of them fanning out and blocking your view of where that bump actually is. And that's what you had on the first lap of the Xfinity Series race. You had Noah Gragson and Justin Allgaier, and I believe it was AJ Allmendinger kind of fanning out. And Gragson was at the far left, almost in the grass. And the line of anybody that followed him, and there's Riley Herbst was behind him, and he missed the bump. but everybody else that ducked out there that just followed him, assuming they had cleared the bump, and probably just in that one instant they thought, okay, well they cleared it, so we'll clear it, and they realized too late when they were fenced in by the other lanes they can't avoid it, and then bam, 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 you had all those cars just needlessly torn up. Brandon Jones, Brandon Brown, Harrison Burton, who actually recovered to get a good finish, which was very surprising. Josh Bilicki, Kevin Harvick. What was there? Alex LeBay, I think, got winged in that one too. So many cars tore up, just used needlessly. There was a lot of needless destruction this weekend, and whether it was the curb on that side or the curb on the other side. And I don't blame the track for being frustrated at that. I think, clearly they thought, okay, well, this is the problem. Once they get rid of it, okay, it'll be fine. And then, of course, it turned out to be a problem on the other side. So I don't know. Spencer Pumpelly, I was impressed with in the number 0 car for JD Motorsports. Almost had a top 10 with 16 to go. Dropped back in the final running order, finished 24th. But as I mentioned, Andy Lally in the 10th spot there, just ahead of Justin Allgaier and Daniel Hemrick and Jeremy Clements among the other drivers that are behind him there. James Davison, despite the struggles he had in the Cup Series race, had a solid run in BJ's Xfinity car, finishing in 18th after starting 34th on the grid. So kudos to him too. I don't think I mentioned him in the article, so definitely mentioning him here. Austin Dillon with the Hour Motorsports car getting in the 6th spot there. Thankfully, few Cup Series ringers. I would almost count Cindric in that category just because he's so dominant at these days. Chase Elliott in the number 1 car, last minute relief for Michael Annett. I hope he's doing better now as he's recovering from surgery. Hated to see that he couldn't get back out there, and it looks like that's going to make it a very difficult path for this next stretch here going into the Xfinity playoffs. At least the Xfinity playoffs start so much later in the year than the Cup and Truck Series do. So hopefully that'll be one thing he can work out. Incidentally, like the paint scheme on the one, first glance, like everybody, it seemed like it looked just like Rick Mast's car, which is a nice tie-in for Indianapolis. I liked it with the tire marks on it too. That gave it a great look towards the end of the race. Austin Hill with a rare DNF reason for the steering box problem. Ignition issues. Oh, ignition issues for Spencer Pumpelly. That's what dropped him out. Oh, that's a heartbreaker. Literally within the last 2 laps while going for a top 10. I didn't see that before. That's a rough deal. Sam Mayer also had a hard hit there trying to avoid that bump, finishing in the 27th spot. Looking further back, Ryan Sieg, just a miserable run there. I don't know what's going on that 39 team, but they have just had every kind of problem. But then, of course, the Xfinity race was the other half of the AJ Allmendinger story. AJ very critical of himself for making a couple mistakes at the start of the race there, and ultimately finishing second to Austin Cindric. Most of the time, you can't say you'd be too disappointed in that, but he certainly was and was very hard on himself, and I guess carried that into today. And much like Justin Haley after he had the yellow line penalty at Daytona in 2017, coming back to win the Cup Series race the next day. So how about that? I guess it wasn't 2017. Was it 2019? It was probably 2019. I think it was a 7 because it's 2017. That was the year Furniture Row won the championship. So but you take my point on that. All right. We're getting requests for trivia. We're going to certainly do that here. Those of you who are new to the chat, we do trivia segment on the little Trivial Pursuit thing here from the late 90s. So we'll do some questions here in just a sec. So we get all that checked out. Alrighty. So let's see. I think that's just about it for the discussion on the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series race. Again, I didn't watch the IndyCar race there, but it sounded like a great win for Will Power there, pulling off the victory. Rick Ware's team apparently had struggles in the Pinty Series this weekend too. I retweeted a post where it looked like the 51 car was in a top 5 run, and unfortunately had a mechanical issue towards the end. So unfortunately, not a great day for the RWR bunch here. I was hoping Josh Bilicki could pull something out in the Sunday race today. I know I was wearing his shirt last week. Almost dug that back out again if he was going to get another good run here today. But we'll see what turns out from here. Alrighty. So we'll go ahead and jump into trivia questions here. For those of you that are new here, again, welcome to the chat here. We do these chats every week after the Cup Series race, usually every Sunday after it. Today turned out to be a little bit different because the race ended so much earlier, even with all the delays and everything that happened. But we'll be doing this today. I'm also going to bring out my notes here to make sure I covered all topics that I was going to cover here in the meantime. All righty. Yes, I'm sure you guys are curious of my thoughts on the Jerry Nadeau's appearance on the Dale Jr. download. We'll talk about that too. But first, we'll put the question up here for the categories. Here they are. So go ahead and mention in the chat which category you'd like me to do. We'll do some trivia questions here. NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. So again, the categories are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. We'll do some question answer questions here in just a moment. So as everybody votes on that there, I'll touch on these here in the meantime. Very excited to see Jerry Nadeau on the Dale Jr. download. I was reminded very much of the interview that I did with him a couple of years ago. He was very self-conscious at the time we spoke. I thought he did a very good job in the interview when we spoke, and he then requested that I take the video off public view on YouTube. So that's now been taken down from there. But he covered a lot of the same ground in the Junior interview, so I'm glad. So kudos to Junior for asking the right questions there and getting the story along. It reminded me a little bit of talking with him that I know Jerry, he gives you a ton of information. He's just got all these memories that just come flowing. And I think that's just the excitement of being able to share these stories and not having been able to do as much of that lately, or maybe not getting as many interviews or anything like that. And so kudos to Dale Jr. and Matt Dillner and the folks over there at the Dirty Mo Media for bringing him on there. I know it meant a lot to him. I know he was very excited. I actually talked with him by text after the fact, and we were talking about maybe doing some other project later on this year. I'm still juggling that with a couple other things I'm working on already. So we'll have some more information on that as we go along here too. But it was a big boost for him, and I hope that his regular viewers enjoyed it as well. Jerry was a big, for those who don't know, those that are new to the chat here, Jerry was, my favorite driver back in the late 90s. Got to meet him back in 2005 after he retired from racing, or basically was at that point out of racing at that point. Was a tremendous driver out there. May not have had the wins really to show for it, but he was really the first driver that I followed from like an earlier part of his career. Whereas before, I just liked the paint schemes or certain drivers, Ricky Rudd and Derek Cope and other ones. I'm still a fan of them as well. And of course, I'm working on Derek Cope's biography. But Jerry was different just because I had followed him from an earlier phase there. And I did a video on that. You can check out on this channel if you haven't seen it already. Why Jerry Nadeau was awesome is the video on there. But I thought he did a good job on the interview. I thought one thing that struck me as interesting from the interview, I sensed that from Jerry's perspective, he had made peace with where he was in his career and where he was in his life, and raising his kid and family life and everything. And Junior kept seeming, and I don't know if it was just Dale Jr., maybe it was also Mike Davis and all that, but they were kind of making it sound like, it's like, are you sure you're okay with that? Are you sure? It's like, man, you had all this and you lost it all and this and that. And I'm like, it's like, no, it's like, yeah, it's okay to be okay with it. And I think they were putting forward like it's okay to not be okay with it, and I get that. But I felt that they were kind of going a little far that direction a bit, and kind of saying like, "Are you sure you're okay with this?" And I'm like, "It's like, dude, don't lean into him on that. Like, if he says he's fine with it, there's that. And if he wants to say something some other time, there's that." But that was a little frustrating. Like I kind of eased up on that in my own interview because I know he's already thinking about it. And I don't need to lay it on any heavier. I mean, I already kind of, in my video, I'm already pretty blunt about it in the fact that, that was part really at the end ostensibly of his career, although he tried to get back into racing as best he could. But regardless, he gave, just a ton of information. He was going over like so many things that he had done in his life and the time with Richard Jackson and how that kind of put him on the fast track for getting into the Cup Series without hardly doing any Busch races and not doing any Truck Series races. It really shows just like how different driver development was at that time and how a driver could just spring up out of nowhere in the Cup Series and be a name. And the guy that was going against Kenny Irwin Jr. and Kevin LePage and others for Rookie of the Year that season, and the Dan Marino effort and everything. It's an interesting story, and it captures a time period that doesn't get talked about. So I'm already giving away a lot here from this if you haven't already listened to it, but definitely worth a listen. So kudos again to Dale Jr. and Dirty Mo Media on that. I also want to again extend my congratulations over to Rick Houston over at the Scene Vault there for getting on his new show there at the Dirty Mo Media group there. I haven't listened to his show yet. I need to check that out. It's on my playlist still, but I'm looking to catch up on that. So kudos to him on his show there. Another thing, I didn't talk about this a couple weeks ago when it was announced. Wendell Scott, his family now, the late Wendell Scott, the one-time winner at Jacksonville in 1963, I believe it was, December of 63. His family is going to receive the trophy that he should have been awarded back in December of 63 in the lead up to Daytona at the end of this month. This news coming from the Wendell Scott Foundation, I believe more than a week ago. I meant to mention this last week, but I didn't mention it on that. So I definitely want to mention that as we now get closer to the end of the month. Great news on this. I'm surprised that this hadn't already happened. One detail I'm still kind of trying to figure out more about. I'm curious if it's the actual trophy that was handed to Buck Baker, if they were able to track it down. I know Buck's no longer with us, and now Buddy Baker is no longer with us. I'd like to know more information about that. Hopefully we'll, find out before Daytona or certainly during the pre-race there. But kudos. And I think it's kind of neat that they're doing it for a Florida race, not just the fact that it's the playoff cutoff race. So it's already going to be a big venue and get a lot of attention, but also in the state where Wendell scored that win. I believe it was Jacksonville that he won back then. So kudos to if there's one thing to applaud the sanctioning body for, I want to be as fair as I can, certainly for that. And I think that'll be really interesting to see for sure. This has certainly been a week to talk about a lot of NASCAR history. Of course, the passing of Imogene McDuffie earlier this week, as well as Bob Jenkins. Thank you to those of you who tuned in to my Wednesday show where we talked about JD McDuffie. I know it was a little bit creative there with the graphics, and I'm glad I was able to kind of share some pictures too, because I was meaning to kind of figure that out. What I ultimately found out during that show is I need to get two screens set up here. I have a second screen I actually had back at the old NASCAR headquarters. Hopefully in the long term, I'll get that set up going again, and we could do kind of the picture-in-picture. I think until then, just doing it off this one screen here, we'll just kind of do this format. So it may not be as exciting to look at with the graphics here, but it is in the works here. So we'll kind of prepare for that and maybe do that in the near future here. But thank you to those of you who tuned in as well. As I also reported yesterday, the new audiobook for JD, The Life and Death of a Forgotten NASCAR Legend, is now available. It was posted on this past Friday, finally approved by Amazon, and it is now listed under JD Second Edition when you pull up on Amazon. And it has a sample of my audiobook. The full 7 hours, I believe 19 minutes is the total play length. I want to make sure this is very clear in particular, and this is a very limited time thing in particular. If you are somebody who has purchased the original audiobook that Waldorf Publishing put together, and it's a very good audiobook. I know a lot of people like that one, but if you have that one and either you weren't satisfied with it, or if you want my audiobook version of it instead, forward me an email with your receipt for that purchase, and I will send you a code to get a free copy of my audiobook. Now, there's a limited number of these codes that I can give out, and they're only for people who purchased them in the U.S. and the United Kingdom, U.S. and U.K. only. But I do have some codes available because I don't want, as much as possible, I don't want people to have to pay for the same thing twice if at all possible. There's only so many of them I have. So if you are interested in doing that, I want to make clear, jump on that sooner rather than later. I'll definitely mention that when we got a lot of people here in the chat here tonight. So if you forgive the plug on that, that's one thing I'm working on. As I am working on the Derek Cope book some more, I actually got some more work on that done, which will be the next book that I'm going to get published. I am planning on doing the audiobook for that book as well. And more information will be available on that when it is ultimately published, whether it's self-published or through another publisher. We'll have some more information on that. On top of that, I have more news on Rise of the Field Fillers. I've been getting several questions on that. I know it's been a long wait. Between the JD audiobook and a couple other things I've been working on here, it's just been kind of on the back burner. I was able to find some great transcription software, which has really sped up assembling the material from the interview that I did with Andy Belmont earlier this year for the next episode of it. I'm very excited to get rolling on that here again. Don't have a release date yet. I was aiming originally for sometime in early September, hopefully at least before our trip to Las Vegas to cover the NASCAR action that weekend in late September. But that is still in the works. So rest assured, the Field Filler series is not over, and we are going to get more content for you guys here on this channel. Thank you again for the super chat here, Ryan Moore. Bob Jenkins' final call in NASCAR was calling Jerry to the victory at Atlanta. How awesome. Yep, perfect timing. Very good point there. And memorable, love that call in particular. That still that brought a tear to my eyes even before there as well. So we got that. Let's see. Whoop, did I miss something here? Did it lag again? I apologize again if it's lagging here. I'm still not getting a notification of it being an issue here, so we got that too. But yes, so we still have okay, we got drivers and tracks tied at 4, pits at 3, polls are still open. Thank you for keeping track of that, Beast of Metal. That really saves me a lot of time for sure. Let's see. We're good here. Okay, good. Where are we on this? Okay. So drivers and tracks. Okay. I think we did drivers last week, so we'll do tracks this time. So we'll jump to that, and we'll do, hang on. We'll do this here. No, okay. So track questions. Let me check here too. Okay, I already mentioned that. All right. Okay. I apologize. I don't have anything really for the show and tell segment here. I want to kind of jump on this sooner. So we'll certainly do this here too. I do usually do the show and tell segment here as part of it. I guess I can count this shirt here. I just picked up this a while back here. Ernie Francis Jr. Congratulations to him on a great season in the SRX series. I think it was a great introduction to him and competitors that hadn't been talked about as much. I expected the IROC to be mostly just retired drivers, but Ernie Francis very active, including an Xfinity start for Carl Long not too long ago. So definitely cool to support him as well. And that's the reason wearing this today for the road course. So here is the first question for tonight. What class of car had a separate 40-lap race during the first Daytona 500? What class of car had a separate 40-lap race during the first Daytona 500? No lag on my end. Okay, that's good. In the meantime, just checking to make sure I didn't miss anything big here in the meantime. Radio broadcast. Tire barrier. Okay, yep. Got that. Okay, good. I think we're caught up on this here. Want to make sure everybody gets their money's worth here for sure. Okay, reading the question again here. What class of car had a separate 40-lap race during the first Daytona 500? I assume it means during the speed weeks or the days leading up to the Daytona 500. The wording isn't great. It's got to fit on 2 screens, so that's a tricky part. What class of car had a separate 40-lap race during the first Daytona 500? Top Fuel, funny car, convertible, hot rods, soft tops, modifieds, Buicks. I should get a couple guesses for Buick. That's interesting. What class of car had a separate 40-lap race during the first Daytona 500? The answer is indeed convertibles. Convertibles is the correct answer. All righty, next question. Okay, what driver won the most Winston 500 races at Talladega in the 70s? What driver won the most Winston 500 races at Talladega in the 70s? Zachary Leffler, I think you were the first one there, so right on there with the convertible. What driver won the most Winston 500 races at Talladega in the 70s? Let's keep this here. Okay. What driver won the most Winston 500 races at Talladega in the 70s? All righty. Jay Walker, Master of Lightning, thank you for your super chat here. Hey, Brock, if you had a time machine, what old race would you go to? Tough call. You know what I probably would go to? I would probably go back to the first Sears Point race I went to back in '92. It'd be interesting to look at it the way I look at it now, where I follow the last place finishers, because like the way I watch races now today is so different from the way I did when I first got into the sport. That would be pretty cool. I think that would be pretty neat. I would probably pick that. Tough call. Good question though. Good question. Hooters 500 would be up there too. Although that last place battle was settled pretty quick. Although I guess at Sears Point it was too. Greg Sachs blew up in the early laps, so there was that. But good question for sure. What driver won the most Winston 5? Did I say the answer already? I don't think I did. First at Talladega in the 70s. The answer is David Pearson. David Pearson is the correct answer. David Pearson. Who was the first on that? I think Zachary Leffler. I think you were the first one on that one. David Pearson is the correct answer. Yeah, those of you guess Buddy Baker or Richard Petty, I mean, those are not bad guesses. Buddy Baker in particular. Also, another thing I want to kind of mention, it's not NASCAR related, but kudos to the people who did the Field of Dreams game this week. Just watched that last night. I didn't watch it live, but I watched it last night. Really enjoyed that. That was such a cool thing. In NASCAR, it's hard to have something like that. I guess the next best thing would be to race on the beach again and do something like that. I mean, it'd be a lot crazier and probably more dangerous for sure. But you know, the closest feel I had to kind of the way that looked was going to Darlington, because Darlington feels like racing in your backyard. You got kind of the trees around it. It's very small town and everything, very kind of local area. You got a lot of people and like local sports teams that help out at the souvenir trailers and everything. Darlington is probably about the closest thing I think that works like a Field of Dreams kind of level, which is interesting because Darlington is so tough as it is, and you have that throwback angle on top of it. But I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed that. So kudos. We were actually when they did the opening with Kevin Costner, actually applauding there at the start of it. I thought that was cool. That was very well done. When Fox feels like caring about doing a broadcast well, they can do it like really well. This is why it upsets me so much when they don't do it, because they're capable of doing that. If they actually, if it's baseball, like, oh man, stop the presses, they'll be all over that. But if it's racing, phone it in. Show the same clips of 1979 and 2001 over again, and then we'll just be back to, we're back there again. But let's see. Let's see. No, not that. It was too easy. How about this? Yeah. All righty. Next question. Don't look this up, of course. Who won the 1998 Goodwrench 500? Who won the 1998 Goodwrench 500? Don't look it up. It doesn't say what track, so we try to guess. There's a tricky one. MLB The Sandlot, absolutely. R.K. Smith finished last. Charles Peterson. I think R.K. Smith finished last in 91. I think it was Greg Sachs in 92. I might be wrong about that, but yeah. Beast of Metal, thank you for the super chat here. If you build it, nerds will come. Kind of prophetic considering the monolithic nature of analytics in baseball these days. Yeah, I mean, the Moneyball thing has kind of demystified some of it there, but I mean, it's nice to have some kind of, callback there. I love the players coming out of the corn. That was awesome. I mean, that was, me about a good intro. I love a good intro. James Earl Jones, amazing. I mean, I know he's very old at this point, but still pulled off that. Much like I don't know who I'm more proud of between James Earl Jones doing that intro and Robin Miller doing the speech for Bob Jenkins here. Both of them I thought were very evocative. Tremendous job for both of them. So that too. Dangerous AJ Allmendinger. I've seen that a lot in the comments. Definitely got to mention that. Who won the 1998 Goodwrench 500? The answer is indeed Jeff Gordon. Jeff Gordon, the correct answer. A lot of you got that one. Charles Peterson Jr., I think you were the first one there. Yeah, MLB at the Sandlot, Irvin Alvarado. I'm waiting for that too. Love the Sandlot. That one, that stands out. That's just such a fun movie. Both of them had James Earl Jones, right? Because James Earl Jones is the neighbor in the Sandlot, right? And gosh, he was in just everything. Let's see. Next question. How many times, looking for a number, how many times did Bobby Allison win the Daytona 500? How many times did Bobby Allison win the Daytona 500? Stop making me want to watch Slap Shoes videos, Trivial Pursuit. Yeah, exactly. It kind of goes up. We got Buick. We got all this. All right, we got numbers for 3. We got 2. We got 69. Nice. We got 13. Okay. How many times did Bobby Allison win the Daytona 500? The answer is 3. 3 indeed. 3 is the correct answer. It was what? Okay, I'm putting myself on the spot. It was 78, 82 with the bumper coming off, right? And then 88 with his son. I think it was those 3. There you go. Okay, yeah. See, Charles Peterson, you beat me to it. There you go. What presidential candidate saw David Pearson win the 1976 Atlanta 500? What presidential candidate saw David Pearson win the 1976 Atlanta 500? All righty, presidential questions. We get one of these about one every 15 or so, it seems like. I think we've had a few different presidential candidates show up in trivia here. We got guesses for Carter, Bumpergate, and Davey. Yeah, there you go. Reagan, Carter, Chubbs Peterson, Obama. No, not quite. Not JFK either. What presidential candidate saw David Pearson win the 1976 Atlanta 500? I said Atlanta 500, right? I think I did. And the answer is indeed Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter. It was trending on Twitter earlier today, I noticed. I think this thing might have a Wi-Fi connection. I've always speculated that. Zachary Leffler, I think you were the first one on that too. I think you were the first on a couple of these. There you go. All righty, next one here. Let's see. What politician was Grand Marshal for the 1976 Daytona 500? So another 1976 question. What politician was Grand Marshal for the 1976 Daytona 500? So the last question was about Atlanta and a presidential candidate. So now we got what politician was Grand Marshal for the 1976 Daytona 500? Yeah, this is a tricky one. Where is it? All right, we got Ford, we got Spiro Agnew, we got Gene Davis, we got Thomas of the Supreme Court, we got Governor of Florida, Reagan. Got a couple for George Wallace. Okay. What politician was Grand Marshal for the 1976 Daytona 500? The answer is indeed George Wallace. George Wallace is the correct answer. Yeah, it seemed like it was going to be an Art Carter one, but not quite. Okay. Here we go. Who were the races at the Rock named after from 1982 through 1984? Who were races at the Rock named after from 1982 through 1984? Yeah, NASCAR has come a long way. Yeah, it's like, wow, yeah. If you Google George Wallace, you'll certainly find out. Who were races at the Rock named after from 1982 through 1984? Yeah, tricky one. Tricky one. It's not an easy one. Doot, 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 doot. Alrighty. Allmendinger's win does this again tweeted by Bob Pockris an hour ago. Allmendinger's win does clinch playoff spots for Hamlin, McDowell, and Almirola. So the 13 winners in Hamlin are in. There are 2 spots left to be decided with 2 races remaining. Okay, so Hamlin is locked in. So now it's down to Harvick and Reddick, I believe, unless it's not. Yeah. Ooh, Daniel Suarez very upset. Wow. Suarez tweeted this an hour ago. It was embarrassing, the lack of respect on the track today. Literally like dumb kids driving bumper cars. We're supposed to be professionals, and today we showed everything but that. Okay, I do not see a call yet for technical infraction. Who were races at the Rock named after from 1982 through 1984? All right, we've seen guesses for Hodgson, Warner Hodgson, J.D. Stacy, Reagan, Hodgson, Fireball Roberts, Airbase Speedway, and the answer is Warner Hodgdon. Hodgdon, I believe, is the Hodgdon. A lot of D's in that one. Those of you guys got Hodgdon. Yeah, you're close enough. Maserati 9, you pretty much got it there at the start. Yeah, that's a tricky one. I think especially with like if you have even the slightest bit of an accent, I imagine that's a real mouthful to say for sure. Oh, come on, these are too easy. Come on, who's buried in Grant's tomb? Kind of questions here. Let's try. There we go. What quarterback? I think we might have had this one. What quarterback was Grand Marshal at the 1998 Trans-South Financial 400? What quarterback was Grand Marshal at the 1998 Trans-South Financial 400? Another Grand Marshal question. And on to quarterbacks. What quarterback was Grand Marshal at the 1998 Trans-South Financial 400? All right, we got several guests. We got Montana and Marino and Brett Favre. Jake the Snake Delhomme. Cordell Stewart. Yeah, a lot of guesses for Marino. Good guess with Marino because, of course, the first plus car was that year, and he was the Grand Marshal for the 500 that year for Daytona. But was he the Grand Marshal for the Trans-South Financial 400? I don't know if there's been people that have been the Grand Marshal for multiple races in a year, or I mean, it's probably more common than you think. I guess I don't really keep track of it. But what quarterback was Grand Marshal at the 1998 Trans-South Financial 400? The answer is Terry Bradshaw. Uh-oh. We got a ringer here. Terry Bradshaw is the correct answer. Jerome Bettis, you're close. Right team, right? Different generation, but yeah. Terry Bradshaw. Bradshaw was the Grand Marshal for the 2001 Daytona 500, if I remember correctly. Yeah, Steeler QB. There you go. Yeah, in South Carolina. Go figure. You think it would be at Pocono, for God, for Pete's sake. All right. Oh, okay. Well, how about this? How about this? This thing is actually asking this. Where did JD McDuffie earn his only career Bush pole? Look at that. It's actually on there. You got a JD McDuffie question on here. Where did JD McDuffie, there you go, now it's in focus, earn his only career Bush pole? Yeah, I know. I'm surprised too. Yeah, how about that? I'm not making it up. Where did JD McDuffie earn his only career Bush pole? Rockingham, Talladega, Darlington, Dover, Bristol, Pocono, Richmond. Wow, you got a pretty good group of these here. All right. We'll probably wrap up here in a little bit. Maybe just do another couple questions here and go from there as you get ready for the. Oh, goodness. I'm draining my computer battery, too. I didn't even plug this thing in. Okay, well, we'll definitely wrap it up here pretty soon because I don't want this conking out on me in the middle of this. Alrighty, JD McDuffie earned his only career Bush pole. The answer is indeed Dover. Dover is the correct answer. Asher, as you go back to gentlemen, start your engines again. Well, you never know. You never know. Did he get into team owning once? Yeah, I think the Fitz Bradshaw team. Good catch on that. Yeah, JD McDuffie question was on here. We'll do one more here just to make sure this thing doesn't go out here. Okay. So last question for today. Thank you again, everyone, for tuning in here today. We'll do one more question to wrap up the show here, and we'll make a couple other things here before we wrap up. So last question for tonight. What track saw Dale Earnhardt move ahead of Mark Martin in points for 1990? What track saw Dale Earnhardt move ahead of Mark Martin in points for 1990? All righty. We got guesses for Phoenix, Miami, Richmond, Phoenix, Rockingham, Indy, Wilkesboro, Nürburgring, Phoenix, Atlanta. What track saw Dale Earnhardt move ahead of Mark Martin in points for 1990? Last question for the evening. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in here. Been a good show tonight. A little bit of everything. Hope you guys have enjoyed it for sure. It's cathartic for sure. What track saw Dale Earnhardt move ahead of Mark Martin? What track saw Dale Earnhardt move ahead of Mark Martin in points for 1990? All righty. Okay, so here we go. Last question for today. The answer is Phoenix. Phoenix, right down to the wire. Phoenix still makes I think it makes a great venue for next to last race of the season. I think it should stay in that spot. Yeah, I think but again, a good championship battle there. Hopefully put on a good venue, good race this year. That's one of the two races plan on covering here in the playoffs, and they get started in September. So yeah, Phoenix is the correct answer. And who was the first on that one? I think Glenn 7000. You were right on there. And it looks like we might be clearing inspection too. So that's a good time here. So excellent. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. A little bit of everything on the show here tonight. Our next show is going to be next week after the Michigan weekend. I guess what is it? Is that the same weekend for Gateway, or is that at the end of the month? But either way, certainly after next Sunday's race, Michigan, there will be our next show. So tune back into this channel. Make sure you subscribe here so you get other updates on this and other videos that I put up here. Rise of the Field Fillers is still in the works. There's some other projects as well. Derek Cope book still going. JD McDuffie audiobook is now available. Again, more details on that available on my Twitter at LastCarOnBrock. Website is lastcar.info. And if you're interested in bonus content, patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. You have a safe week, and I'll see you back here next week. All right. Have a good one, folks.